The rain fell hard that night, washing down the old houses like the sky itself wanted to erase the street. Then came the thunder of boots. "Open up, criminal," the voice roared like a storm. Chief Inspector Blake. The door didn't even have time to creak before his men kicked it off its hinges. The neighbors gasped, cell phones already out, recording every second as they whispered. They finally caught her, the lonely old widow. Inside, the flashlight beams tore through the darkness, cutting across a tiny living room that smelled faintly of dust and soap. A thin woman stood barefoot on the cold floor, her gray hair pulled into a messy bun. Her blanket hung off her shoulders like armor. Her name was Maria Alvarez, and in that moment she was treated like she was nothing. Blake stomped through the doorway, his polished boots scattering broken wood. His voice filled the small house. "You think you can hide from us, huh?" he sneered as he looked around. "A dump like this definitely hiding filth." His men laughed. Maria didn't move. Her hands clutched the blanket tighter, her eyes steady but calm, like someone used to being misunderstood. An officer with a crooked grin yanked open her closet, letting the door slam against the wall. Worn sweaters, faded dresses, nothing more. He picked up a threadbare shawl and waved it like a dirty flag. "What's this, your high society wardrobe?" he mocked, tossing it to the floor. Outside, laughter erupted from the crowd on the porch. "She's probably been stealing from the thrift store," someone shouted. Maria's eyes flicked toward the shawl on the floor. Her voice was soft but carried like steel. "Pick it up." The laughter stopped for a second. The officer froze, smirk fading. He didn't move. He looked at her. Something in her eyes made him step back just a bit, but Blake barked an order and the chaos resumed. Drawers slammed, cushions flew, papers scattered like confetti in a cruel parade. "Look at this dump," one of the younger officers laughed, his ego louder than his sense. "Who even lives like this?" another snorted, lifting a chipped mug. "She steal this too," the crowd outside howled with laughter, phones shining through the rain. Maria stood still, silent, her eyes following every motion. Her stillness wasn't weakness, it was control. The floor creaked as an officer pried up a loose plank with his boot, expecting to find drugs or money. Dust puffed up into the air, nothing there but emptiness. "Guess she hides her riches under the floor," he laughed. But when Maria stepped forward and pressed the plank back into place with her bare foot, the laughter stuttered. Her quiet defiance filled the room, heavier than any noise. A small photo frame sat on a nearby table, knocked sideways by someone's careless elbow. It showed a younger Maria smiling beside a tall man in a crisp military uniform. The wiry officer picked it up, squinting. "Who's this supposed to be, your imaginary general?" he mocked, tossing it back down. The glass cracked, the picture face down. Maria's hand trembled for a moment, but she didn't let them see it. She lifted the frame and set it upright again, her fingers brushing the glass. The neighbors didn't notice. They were too busy performing for their streams. Blake strutted through the mess like he owned the air itself. Broad-shouldered, square-jawed, the kind of man who needed power the way others needed oxygen. "You got anything to say, old woman?" he barked. "Or are you just gonna stand there like a ghost?" Maria looked right at him, her gaze didn't flinch. "That plaque," she said quietly, nodding toward the wall, "it's real." A flashlight turned, there it was, a golden plaque gleaming faintly in the dark. Blake snorted. "Sure it is, probably bought at a pawn shop," his men chuckled. Outside, a woman with heavy makeup whispered to her viewers, "She's delusional, thinks she's somebody." But the air had changed. Even the officers felt it, something about the way she stood, the calm in her voice, the way that plaque glowed under the light. The wiry officer moved closer, his beam fixed on the plaque. "Sir," he said carefully, "this looks legit, general's insignia, high rank." Blake's jaw twitched. "Fake junk," he snapped louder than before. "Keep searching." The old floor creaked again. Maria didn't move. "That plaque," she said softly, "belonged to my husband, General Eduardo Alvarez." Her tone wasn't boastful, just true, and that truth filled the room like a pulse. For a moment no one spoke, then Blake laughed, sharp and forced. "Sure, sweetheart, and I'm the president." The officers joined in, their nervous laughter bouncing off the walls. The neighbors' whispers turned meaner. "Told you she was crazy," one man said, gripping his phone tighter. "She's been lying to everyone for years." Maria didn't answer. She turned her head slightly, her eyes landing on the frame again, the one of her and Eduardo by the lake. Then she whispered something too low for anyone to hear. A young officer, all muscles and pride, kicked over a chair. "You hear that? She's mumbling spells now," he joked. The laughter started again, but then The wiry one found a wooden case on a shelf. He opened it halfway, his breath catching. Sir," he said quietly. Blake snapped, "What now?" But the officer didn't answer. He was staring at a stack of papers, sealed and stamped with military crests. Maria walked toward him, slow but steady, her bare feet silent on the cracked floor. "You shouldn't touch those," she said, calm as the rain outside. Blake snatched the case from the officer's hands. "What's this supposed to be?" he barked. He flipped through the papers. His eyes widened just slightly before his voice hardened again. "Old junk doesn't prove anything." But his hands shook, because right there, clear as day, was a document signed by General Eduardo Alvarez himself, her husband, and stamped with the U.S. military's official seal. Maria didn't gloat, she didn't need to. She simply said, "Believe what you want." Outside, a car passed, its headlights flashing through the window, glinting off the metals still hanging on the wall. The neighbors' whispers slowed. Something about the scene no longer felt like entertainment, it felt wrong. Blake turned back to his men. "Keep going," he ordered, but his voice was losing its edge. "Tear this place apart." As they obeyed, a small metal box fell to the floor. Its lid popped open, spilling metals across the boards, metals engraved with Eduardo's name. The wiry officer bent down, his face pale. "Sir," he said again, his voice trembling, "these are valor medals, combat distinctions." The laughter died completely. Blake's face hardened. "Doesn't change anything," he said, kicking one medal aside. It clattered against the wall and rolled under a chair. Maria knelt slowly, gathering the medals one by one, her hands gentle, her back straight. When she stood, the room was silent. Even the neighbors watching from outside didn't dare speak. "Perfect," continuing smoothly from where we stopped. Maria's hand closed around the last medal, her fingers brushing the engraved letters. The names, the dates, the battles, she didn't need to say anything, the silence spoke for her. The rain outside slowed to a faint drizzle as if the sky itself was watching. The wiry officer swallowed hard. "These are real," he whispered to himself, but Blake heard him and barked, "Shut it, don't let her play you." His voice cracked with forced authority. He didn't notice that the men weren't laughing anymore. Maria rose to her full height, not tall but solid in her quiet dignity. Her hair had come loose from the bun, silver strands falling over her face. She brushed them aside and said softly, "You came here to find a criminal, you found a widow." No one answered. The only sound was the drip of rain through the broken door. Blake's jaw clenched. "You think this pity act works on me?" he snapped. "You think you can stand there and make us feel guilty?" He took a step closer, his voice low and venomous. "Your husband's gone, whatever he was, you're nothing now." Maria didn't move, her eyes met his with a calm that burned. "Then why are you trembling?" she said quietly. The words hit like a slap. One of the younger officers looked away. Another shifted uncomfortably, pretending to check his gear. The wiry one kept staring at the medals in her hand, his expression tight. From outside, the neighbors' whispers turned nervous. The woman with the fake smile lowered her phone, the red live icon still glowing on her screen. I don't think she's lying," she murmured. The man beside her frowned. "What do you mean?" "That seal on the papers," she said, zooming in. "That's real military stuff. My brother was in the army, I've seen that." But the crowd didn't stop watching. They wanted to see how far it would go. Blake turned away, barking orders again just to fill the silence. "Search the kitchen," he shouted. "Check every drawer, every cabinet." His men obeyed, boots pounding against the floor. One officer yanked open the fridge. "Nothing but milk and leftovers," he muttered. Another slammed open the drawers, sending utensils clattering. "Still nothing," he said, his voice uneasy now. Maria watched them tear apart the little she had left. Her hands stayed steady, but her eyes told 1,000 stories: loss, strength, patience. The wiry officer turned his flashlight back toward the plaque, his throat tightening. He whispered to the man beside him, "We raided a general's widow's home. This is wrong." Blake spun on him, furious. "You say that again and you're off the force," he barked, but his own hands were shaking. Maria didn't speak. She walked to a small wooden box near the window and opened it with a small silver key that hung from her neck. Inside were papers, letters, records, photographs. Blake grabbed them before she could even lift them. "What are these?" he demanded. He read the top line. To Maria Alvarez, wife of General Eduardo Alvarez, in recognition of your sacrifice and service, he froze. His eyes flicked across the page, his lips moving silently, then he crumpled the letter in his hand, forcing a laugh. Fake, all of it. The wiry officer stepped forward. Sir, that letterhead, it's Pentagon issue, that's not fake. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air thick with something heavier than dust. The laughter outside had faded into an uneasy murmur. Someone whispered, "What if she's telling the truth?" Maria's voice broke the silence. For years I've lived quietly, I didn't ask for respect or pity, I only wanted peace. Her tone wasn't pleading, it was firm, steady, like a teacher reminding a child of a forgotten lesson. You barged into my home, dragged my husband's name through the dirt, and laughed over his medals. Blake opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The wiry officer knelt, picking up one of the medals again. His voice was soft, almost reverent. General Alvarez, he's the one who led Operation Secure Cross, right? He saved an entire convoy during the border conflict. Maria nodded once. He did, and he never came home. The officer looked at her, his face pale. Ma'am, I'm so sorry I didn't. Blake cut him off with a shout. Enough, his voice cracked with desperation. We're still finishing the search. But before anyone could move, Maria turned and picked up her phone, a small, old flip model, scratched but working. She pressed a number. The room froze. She put the phone to her ear, her eyes never leaving Blake. After 2 rings, a man's voice answered, low, calm, powerful. This is High Command. The officers went still. The neighbors fell silent. Even the rain stopped sounding like rain, it was just quiet. Maria spoke, her tone steady as a heartbeat. This is Maria Alvarez, you told me to call if they ever came for me. There was a pause, then the voice said, clear and sharp, stay where you are. Blake's radio crackled a few seconds later. A new voice, one that made his face drain of color. All units, withdraw immediately. I repeat, withdraw. You are trespassing on protected property belonging to a decorated military widow. Leave at once. No one moved. Now, the voice roared through the radio. The officers scrambled, tripping over furniture, stammering apologies. The wiry officer dropped his flashlight. The young one who had mocked her fell to his knees. Ma'am, I didn't know, he whispered. Please don't ruin me, I have kids. The neighbors on the porch stared in shock, their phones still recording but hands trembling. Oh my God, someone muttered. She wasn't lying. Blake was the last to move, his face was red, his jaw tight. This isn't over, he muttered, but his voice was hollow now. He turned to leave, but Maria's words stopped him cold. Yes, it is. Her tone didn't rise, it didn't need to. The men filed out one by one, their boots heavy with shame. The neighbors backed away, silent now, eyes wide. The woman who had mocked her tried to speak, we didn't mean, but the words died before they could leave her mouth. Maria stood in the center of her ruined home, holding the folded letter to her chest. The lights from police cars faded into the rain. The silence left behind was deeper than anything before. But it didn't stay quiet for long. A soft click echoed through the room, the sound of a recorder turning on. Maria set it on the table. Every insult, every laugh, every cruel word had been captured. The whole raid was recorded from the moment Blake kicked down her door. She plugged it into her old phone, pressed send, and walked to her chair. Outside, the street was buzzing again, but this time the whispers were different. By morning, the headlines were everywhere. Police raid on General's widow sparks outrage. Decorated hero's wife humiliated by local authorities. Blake's face was all over the news. 2 officers were fired, 1 resigned. The neighbors who had live-streamed her humiliation became the villains of the internet. Their own videos turned against them, replayed millions of times with captions calling them cowards. Maria didn't gloat, she didn't even watch the coverage. She spent the day quietly, picking up the broken frame, setting her husband's photo upright again, and polishing the plaque on the wall until it gleamed. That evening, a young reporter came to her door, trembling slightly as she held a microphone. Mrs. Alvarez, can you tell us what happened? She asked, her voice hopeful, nervous, human. Maria opened the door just enough for her face to be seen. Let the truth speak, she said simply, and closed it again. The clip went viral not because of her words but because of her calm, that quiet, unshakable grace. The next day, Blake came back, not in uniform this time, just a man with a hollow look in his eyes. He stood at her gate shouting, "You think you're special now? You're nothing without that title. Your husband's dead." He spat on the ground. "You'll die alone just like he did." The neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains, too afraid to join in this time, but Maria didn't step outside. She opened her window and looked at him. Her expression didn't change. She didn't yell back. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than his anger. Across the street, a young boy watched through his window. He remembered how Maria had brought his family soup when his mother was sick. He saw Blake shouting and his small hands clenched. He opened his window and shouted, "Leave her alone." His voice cracked, but it echoed. Blake froze. The neighbors went quiet. Maria's eyes softened as she looked at the boy. She nodded once, a small, kind nod that said everything. Then a black car rolled up, its engine quiet but heavy. The door opened, and out stepped General Marcus Tate, a man known across the nation. Eduardo's old comrade. His presence made the air itself straighten. He walked past Blake without a glance and stopped in front of Maria's door. "Maria Alvarez," he said, his voice firm but warm, "on behalf of the United States Army, you are to be reinstated as an honorary military advisor. Your husband's service and yours will never be forgot." The street went silent, phones dropped, faces paled. Blake stepped back, his lips trembling. Maria opened the door. Her blanket was gone now. She stood tall in a plain gray coat. She extended her hand and shook the general's. Her grip was steady, her face calm. The cameras flashed, but she didn't pose. She didn't need to. By the next morning, the story had spread beyond the neighborhood, across the country. People called her the widow of honor. Letters arrived by the hundreds. Veterans wrote to her. Strangers sent flowers. The neighbors avoided her eyes now, each one carrying their own guilt. The woman with the fake smile deleted her channel. The man with the gold watch lost his sponsors. Their names were trending, but for all the wrong reasons. Maria didn't rejoice, she simply lived. She cleaned her house, repaired what was broken, and hung Eduardo's medals back in place. One afternoon, she walked outside for the first time in weeks. The air was cool and the sunset painted everything gold. The boy who had defended her ran up shyly, holding a small flower. She took it gently, her eyes kind. She placed it under the plaque beside Eduardo's name. "He'd have liked that," she said softly. From that day on, no one ever called her lonely widow again. People waved when she passed. Some whispered apologies, but she never demanded them. She didn't need to. The truth had already done what revenge never could. And when people asked what kept her strong through it all, she never answered with words. She simply looked at the sky, the way she had the night Eduardo left for his last mission, and smiled faintly. Because she knew the truth, silence could be the loudest roar. This wasn't just her story, it was for everyone who's ever been laughed at, doubted, or dismissed, for everyone who's been told they're nothing, for everyone who stood their ground when the world tried to break them. Maria Alvarez proved something that night. You don't have to fight to win, you don't have to shout to be heard. Sometimes you just stand tall and let the truth speak for you. And it always does.